Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are looking at something, something absolutely fascinating and honestly, profoundly important. When we think of authoritarianism, we kind of tend to imagine it as this sudden event, right? Like an accident of history or just a spontaneous collapse of order. But the source material we're digging into today reveals a totally different reality. Authoritarianism is absolutely not an accident. It is a deliberately constructed system. It's a meticulously built architecture. And today, we are going to examine the blueprints.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to break down this architectural blueprint into 4 distinct phases. 1. The blueprint of control. 2. Dividing the population. 3. Demolishing institutions. And 4. The savior complex.
So, starting with phase 1, the blueprint of control. Any architect will tell you that a structure needs a rock-solid foundation. But in the architecture of authoritarianism, this foundation isn't made of concrete or steel. It is built entirely on specific population dynamics. According to the source, the very first step is strikingly simple but deeply, deeply effective. Identify the majority for support and identify the minority to target. This foundational step requires literally separating the general public into 2 highly distinct groups. You've got to draw a hard line in the sand before you can even start building the walls.
Moving on to phase 2. Dividing the population. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that happens. Once those 2 groups are identified, the framework requires actively driving them apart using some seriously contrasting psychological manipulation. The tactics for the majority revolve entirely around manipulating identity, instilling pride, inducing victimization, and spreading fear. Meanwhile, the tactics aimed at the minority are just completely destructive: dehumanization, demonization, and the relentless use of fake news. It's a dual-pronged approach, perfectly designed to isolate the 2 sides from each other.
Let's look a little closer at the tactics for the majority. To keep them compliant, the system instills pride through very specific, physical manifestations. We're talking about aggressive nationalism, the building of massive religious structures, erecting imposing statues, and heavily showcasing developmental schemes. The whole goal here is to give the majority a false sense of security. It's highly theatrical, right? It's all about creating this grand spectacle of strength and prosperity that the majority can directly tie their own personal identity to.
Now, what's really interesting about this dynamic is the incredible psychological dissonance it creates. While the majority is being pumped full of this invincible pride, they are simultaneously made to feel deeply vulnerable. The system actively induces a sense of victimization in the majority by pointing to alleged historical exploitation by the minority. It's a fascinating paradox. Basically, you're told you are the greatest, most powerful group, but also that you're the eternal victim of a much smaller, weaker group.
And that dissonance, it creates anxiety, which leads us directly to the next critical component: fear. By spreading propaganda and scaring the majority into thinking there's a constant looming threat from the minority, the system literally binds its supporters together. Think of fear as the structural mortar holding this newly divided foundation in place. When people are afraid, they look for protection, and they cling tighter to those grand, pride-inducing structures the authoritarian system just built for them.
Which brings us to phase 3. Demolishing the institutions.
Here's the thing. An authoritarian structure absolutely cannot coexist with other load-bearing walls. Existing independent structures, the checks and balances of a free society, must be systematically demolished to make room for absolute control. The source material lays this out as a chillingly efficient step-by-step demolition guide. Step 1. Suppress the opposition in any vocal dissent to clear the site. Step 2 is to demolish the independence of the judiciary and law enforcement, effectively removing the rules of construction. And Step 3 is to take control of the media.
I really want to focus on that last point, the capture of the media. Taking control of the information flow is absolutely vital to this entire architecture. Why? Because the media is the necessary tool to continuously reinforce the propaganda, the fear, and the fake news we talked about earlier. Look, if you're going to demonize a minority and convince a majority that they're under threat, you need a loudspeaker that literally never turns off. Controlling the media ensures that the architect's narrative is the only one the public ever actually hears.
And finally, phase 4, the savior complex.
Every building needs a roof, right? Every pyramid needs a peak. In the architecture of control, this final, highly visible element is the singular leader. And notice how all the previous groundwork we just walked through makes developing a cult following totally possible? Think about it. You have a majority that is simultaneously proud, victimized, and terrified. You've completely dismantled the independent courts and neutralized political opposition. and you control the media. This perfect storm creates an environment where engineering a savior isn't just possible, it becomes the logical next step for a population desperate for relief from the very fears the system itself created. Amazingly, history shows us time and again how incredibly fast this final capstone can be dropped into place once the foundation is set.
So, the crucial point is summarized perfectly in this striking quote from our source material: promote oneself as the savior and the one having the solutions to all problems. The leader steps up and presents themselves as the ultimate and indeed the only structural support keeping the whole society from collapsing. They alone can protect the majority, they alone can defeat the minority, and they alone can solve the crises that they themselves helped manufacture. It's the final brick in the wall of control. So, there's your complete blueprint. The blueprint of control, dividing the population, demolishing the institutions, and the savior complex. But why does this actually matter to us? What should you take away from all this? Well, understanding this remarkably cohesive framework is absolutely vital for modern media literacy. When you know how the building is constructed, you're far less likely to be blindly ushered inside. It allows you to step back and objectively evaluate the political and social movements happening all around the globe.
Which leaves us with this final thought. As the source material makes beautifully clear, these systems do not just happen overnight. They are meticulously constructed, brick by brick, narrative by narrative. So if authoritarianism is built step by step, how closely are you checking the architecture of your own society? Keep asking questions, keep looking at the blueprints, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.